Hello and welcome back to the West Ham Breakdown with me, Jack Elderton, and my mate Callum Goodall. Now, usually at the top of the podcast, I do like a link to Patreon and I do like a little preview of what's on the podcast today. We do have some plans for stuff that's going to be on the podcast today, but I feel like we need to just get straight in at the top and acknowledge what we've all just been through. What a horrible evening last night was, eh?
Yeah, it wasn't fun, was it? It really wasn't fun, and just made worse. But and it feels like this has happened a fair few times actually so far this season. But I lull myself into some sort of false hope because we have an okay 15 minutes at the start, and I'm like, oh, hello, we might be back, we might be clicking, and then it all just falls away, and the even a sniff of challenge or difficulty, and it seems as though it just spirals rapidly out of control. And yeah, after what felt like a promising, I think 15 to 20 minutes opening, I think we were on, like, maybe we weren't on top, but we were better than our own standards. I would say we'd certainly improved from what we'd seen this season, and it was exciting. It was direct, and it felt like there was an energy about the place to begin with. Yeah, it didn't last long, and then we were under the cosh for the next 70 minutes, peppered with various set pieces from all sorts of places, which was a real frustration of mine actually as well throughout the game. It's just like, know who you're up against. Like, don't do the petulant, oh, I've given up on this game, so I'm just gonna like push someone over out of frustration, because they can deliver a ball into the box to one of their many big units. Like, that's just game management. Even if you are under the cosh, make your own life easier. And it felt like they were compounding the sort of just issues, I guess, but the struggle on the pitch by way of silly decisions, which we'll definitely get into, no doubt. But yeah, thoroughly disappointing. Only made worse by the fact that I actually allowed myself to feel a modicum of excitement in the opening attacks.
Yeah, well, at least you had. How long was your journey into the ground?
Actually, there was delays on the Northern Line yesterday, so it was really tough. No, it probably took me about an hour. But I will push back to you, and I'll let you have the floor and tell everyone how long you decided to travel to get to this wonderful spectacle under the floodlights.
Yeah, so I've been looking after a mate the last couple of weeks on the other side of the world, it feels like, because
Certainly
my day started at 8 in the morning. I got home after a flight and a few trains either end, and spent about 20 minutes at home dropping my bags off, and then immediately got back on the train out to the game. So, and arrived 20 minutes before kickoff.
Yeah, the worst part was for you didn't even get to experience the food that was in the press lounge yesterday, which was a delicious lasagna with a really good coleslaw, salad, garlic bread, baguette, tiramisu. So yeah, Jack didn't even that was the highlight of my night. Just to rub it in and peel back the curtain for everyone. That's what we were served up yesterday. But Jack,
didn't
after
go to the
all that
post-match
travelling,
presser.
no. Well, there was no chance I fancied going in there. I didn't have anything valuable to ask.
Well, I think the top end question is, obviously it was a disaster. Everything I think that could have gone wrong, minus Brentford being clinical and scoring more of their many chances, went wrong. How, in a situation like this, when you have such a catastrophic performance, and this this is a totally catastrophic performance. It's the worst one we've had, I think, since we lost 6-0 to Arsenal. That was bad. I think this was probably worse, because I think this could easily have been 5 or 6, and that was against Arsenal. This was against Brentford. How do you assess the damage in a situation like this? I remember walking out of the ground with you, and we were talking about whether we wanted to go to the post-match press conference or not. I said literally the only thing I think I could muster as a question is, how as a manager do you communicate with your players after a game like that? because it must be so difficult, because there's no part of your instruction that would have been go out there and lose every physical battle you get into for the next 90 minutes. And that's what happened.
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult, isn't it? And incredibly disappointing. Also hard to know where to start. I think as well, it's probably more difficult for Nuno to communicate to the players as well, because I can only imagine that there will have been some confusion from the players' side in terms of the selection. If you just read the sort of fan base and how baffled we all were with, firstly, the selection, which I think we sort of rationalised but before kick-off, because it was players had been away on international duty. Diouf had played a lot of minutes. Mavropanos had played a lot of minutes. Wan-Bissaka had played a lot of minutes. They've travelled from all corners of the globe. Like, there will be fatigue. Fine, I get that. Then the team line up on the pitch, and I think the fullback department was one area that there was certainly some confusion with anyway, because people assumed that Diouf and perhaps Wan-Bissaka would start. What we didn't anticipate was that Scarles would be played on the right and Kyle Walker-Peters would be played on the left. And I think, whilst I completely agree with the sentiment that it's really difficult for Nuno to go into that dressing room with anything other than rage, really, because especially a Nuno team, you need to be able to contest the duels. You don't necessarily have to win every duel, but you need to be in there. You need to compete, I think, is the word that he's been using a lot. As soon as he came in, he talked about how he was going to make the team compete. We were going to compete in the duels. We were going to compete in the league. Every game we was going to be competing. And if that was the remit that he's come in and set out, then he can't feel anything other than disappointed, because we did not compete in the duels last night. We were second best in every duel, really, embarrassingly so in some. But I do think as well, from the players' side, they'll feel that for 45 minutes they maybe weren't put in the best situation, because a lot of the stuff that looked good in the first 10 minutes very quickly became overshadowed by the fact that you had a right back trying to overlap that couldn't use his right foot and constantly had to cut inside on his left foot when he got to the byline, and then that stunted everything that we might have had going forward. I think a lot of the build-up looked a little bit cagey. I think, some of the players looked uncomfortable passing out to the players to their weak foot, and then the angles that they're receiving the ball at as well. So I think the players maybe would have felt a little bit confused by that, and then obviously that's compounded by the fact that he makes three changes at half-time? Three changes at half-time, which suggests to the players that that's sort of an admittance that, okay, I cocked up there. So just a bit of a mess from all sides, really. I think if I was going to put my flag in the sand on either side, for me, I would side with Nuno and forgive the tactical experimentation, which I think was probably well thought out, because it did work in the first few minutes, and I think actually it probably would have continued to work had we competed in the duels a bit more. But I can't cut the players any slack, really, because frankly the game model has been simplified to a point that there's much less for them to really worry about as such, and you'd hope that would make their life a lot easier on the pitch, and then maybe the performance would uptick and maybe they would be able to contest those duels a bit better than they had been, because perhaps previously they were too focused on the tactical stuff that meant that their dueling suffered. But no, now we're just at a point where actually it's just not Premier League quality at the minute, which is alarm bell season, really.
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of what you said. I think the only thing I feel slightly differently about would be how much weight I would give to the kind of like wrong foot fullback situation in terms of stunting attacks. Like, to some degree, there's a few moments where Oli Scarles gets into a few decent-ish positions, and him being on his way, particularly like right at the end of the first half, there's one where he does overlap and he cuts back inside when he had an opportunity to hit byline and cross, right? But for me, it's probably a bit simpler than that, and that's simple anyway. But if you can't get up the pitch, if there's no means by which you can get up the pitch, which ultimately comes down to two things really: build up and ability to sustain and hold the ball if you go long, right? And if you don't have one, you definitely need the other. And I think to come into a game where we didn't have either, you're always going to have you're always going to have problems. The game is always going to be more and more difficult as it goes on, as it settles into any kind of pattern. And that's how it felt to me. Like, you can overcome it maybe a little bit at the start with some momentum and some enthusiasm, and we do some good things in the first 10 minutes of the game. But even in the first 10, 15 minutes of the game, you can see things that are going to go wrong. You see things in the build-up that
100%.
are problematic. You see things in the long ball situations. You see, okay, right, yeah, in this situation, Souček's won one off a goal kick. In that situation, Paquetá's managed to win one against Van den Berg. But you know, if you sit back and think about that for any length of time, you think, okay, well, that might have, yeah, we might have won maybe the first two, but Paquetá going into those duels against Van den Berg and Collins for the rest of the game is probably going to lose most of those duels. And if we're being forced to go long quite a lot to him in build up because we can't play through, then we're going to increase the number of duels, which is only going to end up by law of averages working in favour of the two big centre backs that are very good in the air, not in favour of Paquetá. Now, there are some moments in the first half where Paquetá gets to drop off 9, and we know he's good in those moments, and we get nice combination play off Mathias. And you can see some of the ideas about kind of overloading the centre of the pitch. Fernandes comes in off the left wing, Bowen's going beyond, Somerville's going beyond. He starts at 10 really in this game, so he can attack the space in behind quite directly. There are some ideas maybe about using the fullbacks on their weak foot to kind of like stimulate their angles to play inside a lot of the time rather than focusing on wide build up. Some of the thought there might be that typically, you know, there might be a bit more comfort with Nuno to play lots of crosses as a way of generating chances. But when your front two are Paquetá and Somerville, you can't really be doing wide build up and crosses because you're not going to get anything off it against Brentford with their centre back. So trying to think of ways to make sure that the game is played from our perspective in the middle of the pitch and through overloading the middle of the pitch makes some sense. But then I think you need to select a midfield pairing that is more comfortable on the ball to actually enable any of that stuff to work out. And I think with Souček and Irving, what you see is the kind of like trade-off of trying to do that and trying to have a front line that can combine together and be close together and find ways to progress and be dynamic and attack quite directly. Doesn't then work if you're trying to pick a midfield that physically can compete aerially and help the centre backs when balls come into the box from Brentford's attacks. And balancing those two things ends up sort of leaving you neither here nor there and just kind of quite bad at everything as the game goes on. So some of it's to do with the sort of wrong foot fullbacks. I think that's the headline thing that looks weird on the lineup. But maybe it's, I think, you know, ultimately, if you're an opposition manager against West Ham at the moment with the physical limitations of the West Ham squad and the lack of a striker that can hold the ball, you probably do just come into games and say, we'll just send loads of bodies forward. What are they going to do?
Yep.
You know, going to be forced to clear the ball and then we're going to win the duel. And then we just get to reload attacks or reload set pieces, depending on which kind of team we are. And for Brentford, it was just reload set pieces again. And, you know, really, I think at halftime it should have been 2, if not 3-4. It was so dominant certainly from 20 right through to 45. It was, on few occasions really over the last few years have I seen an opposition come and be so completely, utterly dominant. It was total one-way traffic for that whole period. Final things. What I don't want to do this because, you know, like, I think as a sort of a cult hero and we're all like engaged with the story that of his career and how he ended up at West Ham and how he's actually performed in the minutes he's gotten here and there, and in training obviously he's done enough to convince different managers now to select him. How does Andy Irving get into the starting lineup when there are two young players, one which we've produced and one which we've spent a decent chunk of change on getting out of Monaco, sat on the bench that play in that position?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I'll do Charlie's job here, producer Charlie, and chuck in the fact that in Irving's defence, he did complete almost all of his passes and was our most accurate passer of any player that played more than 15 passes. Not that that's a particularly high bar, but I'll defend him somewhat. Other than that, I will say, that was the biggest shock for me. I think Scarles was a surprise because of how good Diouf has been compared to the rest of the squad so far this season. But I kind of understood, A, the travel and international aspect, and also B, why not give Scarles another shot? Good for his confidence, new manager, context, like, it kind of makes sense. Irving, much as I love the bloke, if that same argument for Scarles applies to that position as well in midfield, then it's Potts or Magasa ahead of him for me in terms of long term. Is Andy Irving likely to be the first choice central midfielder at any point in his career during his time at West Ham? Realistically, no. Also, long term, should you as a club have a vested interest in giving as much opportunity to the players that, even if they do not become West Ham regulars, may or may not hold significant resale value, and therefore you want to protect that by giving them opportunities to develop? Yes. Am I likely to be able to embed one of Potts or Magasa into the starting 11 more so than Irving? Yes. Am I more likely to be able to sell one of Magasa or Potts for money than Andy Irving? Yes. So, like, for all of the reasons, I just don't get, and this is not a slight on Irving, obviously, like, I actually think of all the players on the pitch, he does not come out as one of the worst, in my opinion. I think he actually did an okay job, all things considered, when you factor in his limitations. He's not a 6, realistically. He's a 10 that can be very good technical execution. You see that in his passing game. I think the way, if given time on the ball, he can distribute the ball is really impressive. Like, almost textbook. Like, if you were going to coach someone to be like, here's how you should ping a ball 40, 50 yards across the pitch, he's got the execution on lock, but he also cannot cover ground at Premier League level, contest duels at Premier League level, and I would rather, even if Potts and Magasa can't do it either, like, at least let me see them from a long-term point of view. We've just spent a load of money on Magasa, like you say, and we've scouted him a lot. We've watched a lot of stuff. We've watched a lot of his minutes at Monaco, and, like, would he have been the antidote to last night's performance? No, because it was a massive issue across the pitch by everyone. But would he, in my opinion, have allowed us to play with slightly more bite and energy in the midfield? Yes, I think so. And as I say, even if that isn't necessarily the case, I have much more of an interest as a fan, as a analyst, but also I would think, if I assume the role of someone within the club, that would be, to me, the logically the most sensible thing to do. But again, there will be reasons, of course, because Nuno made the decision and he's not just going to have done it for a joke. But yeah, to me, it defied all logic, really, and I think the result and the performance, kind of the proof's in the pudding, right?
I think the big thing in summary, the big thing for me is that it was very difficult to find a solution to the situation we found ourselves in midfield in the summer transfer window. There wasn't going to be a player that we bought in that fixed all of the problems that we had in that area. Wasn't going to be 2 players that we bought in that were going to fix all of our issues in that area. Frankly, we didn't have the kind of finances necessary to bring in ready-made players across the entire midfield to fix the situation we'd landed ourselves in. The only way we could resolve the situation was by recruiting young players who had the ability to develop into the kind of players we needed them to be long term. The only way those players go on and become those players that you want them to be long term is if they play. Mathias starts, comes off at half time, and Magasa doesn't get on the pitch, and Potts doesn't get on the pitch. I don't see a long-term solution to the issues we're facing if these guys don't play most of the available minutes, unless we're, if one of them is performing catastrophically, then they have to come off. But if it's okay at an individual level, then I think things are bad enough around them in that department that they need to be given the opportunity to come through those mistakes that we said that they were going to make. When we signed Mathias and Sankuti Magasa, 2 players that we really liked and 2 players that we were very keen on, we said they're going to come in and make mistakes. Things are not going to be perfect. instantly, we're going to have to push through that, because it's the only way to resolve the situation we found ourselves in this area of our squad.
Yeah, and I think the bluntest way I can put it, and West Ham fans won't want to hear this at all, and I, as a West Ham fan, I don't enjoy saying it, but ultimately the way I'm looking at it from a squad management and squad planning point of view is, if we're to go down, I would like to go down having given Fernandes and Magassat as many minutes as possible, so that when they inevitably say they don't want to play football in the chat. This is what Southampton did with Fernandes, right? This is why they were able to charge us so much money, is because even in amidst all the crap at Southampton as they went down, he still stood out as a decent enough player and a decent enough prospect that they could actually recoup a decent fee for him and sell him back up the food chain. But if we don't give them the minutes or give them the platform to showcase their abilities, even in a terrible squad, then we're doing ourselves as much a disservice as we are them. Like, that for me is a real big issue, and I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and suggest that we are going to go down because we played Andy Irving, but I think let's be real and say that we're clearly in a relegation fight at the minute, based on where we are in the table and based on the performance that we've just put in against a team that was dubbed largely as being relegation candidates this season, certainly more so than we were going into the season, with the money spent and all the stuff about Frank leaving. And yeah, it just... There's many reasons to be frustrated, but that I think is one of them. It's a horrible way to break before a pod, isn't it? But like, if I'm gonna go down, let Freddie Potts take me down.
Yeah, and when you said if given time about Andy Irving, the if given time was doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. Anyway, we'll break there and then we'll come on to performance. Usually we do that in extra time, but I think this game was the kind of game where,
a chat.
It has to reach the main pod. Okay, so if selection was a big issue, and we weren't happy with some of the things that happened in terms of the squad that was picked for the game, but then also I think fair to say we didn't speak about it really, but fair to say not happy with some of the changes made either. I don't think the changes were great. Let's talk about worst offenders. I think you said that you wouldn't have Andy Irving down as one of the worst offenders. So let's start with a couple of players that I know that we can definitely agree on. And those are the two starting centre-backs in this match, who were just incredible levels of bad in this game. I can't believe how bad they were. Yeah, I don't know who you want to start with. You can go, but yeah. For me, Jean-Clair Todibo, that was something special.
Yeah, it certainly was. It's weird again, isn't it? Because it's just such a Todibo performance, but it's just not the kind of performance you can have from any centre-back, but also certainly a centre-back in a Nuno side. Like, there were moments, and we both sort of audibly exclaimed when they happened when we were watching it. It was like there were moments where, hello, anticipation from Todibo to get up and press. Like, where was that under Potter when we actually needed it, when he was playing as a wide centre-back? And where was the aggression to step up and go and meet those balls in the way that only really Mavro has the sort of endeavour to do regularly? And it just didn't seem like... And now Potter's gone, and Nuno kind of wants his centre-backs to be a little bit more disciplined, hold the line, be slightly less aggressive, and try and dominate the duels when you do contest them. No, Todibo was like, oh, it's just clicked. Oh, I know he's not here anymore, but let me just show that I can do it quick time. And yeah, and you know what? In those moments, fine. The rest of the 75 or 80 minutes, man, I don't know what I was watching. It's just... It's stock record, isn't it? It's the basics. It is the basics, and there is arguably no other manager in the Prem bar Moyes, probably, and maybe now Deitch, that he's been appointed at Forest, where your centre backs doing the basics well are as important as they are under someone like Nuno. And the fact that neither centre back fancied contesting with any level of self-respect the duels against Brentford striker, it was just comical. Like, it felt like I was on the other side of the table now, because this is what I used to be, the Brentford fan, looking at Mikel Antonio and going, these defenders, they don't know what they're getting themselves into. Antonio's built different. He's going to just body you off. He might not have any technical ability really compared to some of the strikers in this league, but boy, oh boy, if he goes shoulder to shoulder with you, you're not coming out of the other side. I know what it felt like to watch Antonio now from the other side of the table. In part because I thought Igor Thiago was actually fantastic. But
he was brilliant.
Come on, lads. You got to do a better job. You got to at least make it difficult, and it really didn't feel like it was difficult for him at any point during the game. Yeah, I don't know. I sort of had a thought as well, a slight tangent, but I was thinking about it the other day because there's clearly been a drop off, right, with the centre backs, just in general across the squad. Like Kilman was one of our better performers when he first joined. Todibo, I would say, was never really that good, but he's at a nadir, I would say. He's performing just terribly. We obviously don't have a striker who can do a lot of the stuff that Igor Thiago can do. It's been a problem for us. We don't have a striker that can run the channels. We don't have a striker that can really hold up or contest duels. I'm now wondering if there is some sort of correlation, and it does come back to squad building, whereby if your centre-backs are not training day in, day out with a striker who's going to cause them any real issues, how can you really expect them week in, week out to go into duels against Premier League centre-forwards who are more physical and who are more dominant in those duels when they're not getting that experience in training? There's obviously going to be some level of drop-off because it's like a shock to the system every time they step onto the pitch, because it's like, whoa, oh, I've got to mark Haaland or like any of the, like, especially at the minute as well in the context of the Premier League where big strikers are in vogue, like that is the striker of the moment. We just have not gotten on to that at all, and we sort of, I think we joked about this right when Potter arrived. It was like we're arriving at a tactical moment 2 or 3 years too late. Like that, the moment of the false nine striker, we finally realised, and we went and sort of decided, yeah, let's try Bowen up top, let's try Paquetá up top, let's get Fulkrug who likes to drop and link. And it's like, no, lads, that Antonio lad that everyone used to slag off a few seasons ago because he was crap. Well, no, he would be brilliant right now. And yeah, the idea of being a centre back training against Antonio, even when he wasn't necessarily starting for us, he was still in training. You can bet your bottom dollar that he was giving it because he would have wanted to get back into that team. If there's one thing Antonio is, he's motivated, and he believed genuinely that he was one of the best strikers in the Premier League and that he deserved to start even when he was out of form.
You have to. It doesn't matter who you are, you have to believe that.
Yeah. And training against someone with the motivation to get back into the starting 11, particularly when he's as physical as he was, must have been really good preparation for getting into those Premier League like actual matches. And I just feel like now, not having someone like that, it has to be having some sort of impact. It really does, which is why I think a striker has to be a real priority. That's a different conversation for a different podcast, but it's those sort of things. Like you can analyze the on-pitch stuff that we see, but like the training stuff, the implications of that, I think have only really clicked for me this last week or so, but I'm fairly convinced that it must be playing a big part, because there is no way that you get that performance that we've just seen from Kilman and Todibo against, sure, a good Premier League striker, but I think they would have been way better prepared for that game if they'd been training with Antonio all week rather than, well, realistically, what is Callum Wilson and Callum Marshall. Good players in their own right, but they are not falling into that archetypal Premier League big man, physical channel runner, dual dominator archetype at all.
No, and one of them is physically past his best level by quite a long way, and one of them is, a young nippy striker who, like, for all of his strengths, is really quite poor in the physical duels. Yeah, because he's not a big guy, and there's no way around that for Callum Marshall. So if you get comfy training against those players in the week, it is going to be a shock to the system when you come to a Premier League game week and it's like, oh, this guy is getting a shoulder in early, and now I've lost my balance, and now I'm definitely not winning this header. All that is well and good, Callum Goodall. When you spend 40 million quid on a centre back, you cannot lose an aerial to Mikkel Damsgaard.
No, he can't.
That's an illegal manoeuvre in my book.
Yeah.
It's a sackable offence. I think we've said this before as well. I feel like we've had this moment on the podcast before about Jean-Clair Todibo, about him losing an aerial. I feel like we've had this.
I think for him as well, particularly in that, in the moment that you're referencing as well, and this speaks to a wider issue. He's not actually very good when he's shoulder to shoulder anyway, but I think this is as much about like defensive fundamentals, like reading the flight of a ball in the air as a centre-back when your manager is asking you to defend your box, maybe more so than most managers, becomes incredibly important. And I think there's a big enough evidence base now to suggest that that isn't a strength of Todibo, because there are numerous occasions where he's not even really in a duel with Damsgaard because his feet aren't set in a way that allows him to actually be touching Damsgaard. Like it
happens later with Sharda as well,
yeah.
right? When Sharda hits the bar. It's, same sort of thing. It's just kind of not aware of what's happening fast enough.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, that is... he is losing a duel to Damsgaard and he is losing a duel to Sharda because that is his man and he therefore should be picking it up. But I almost feel like, and the data probably even picks it up, because it's like, is he even contesting a duel if he's just underneath the ball? And he's like not even gone for the header, it's just sailed over his head. And then it's like, shit, I didn't know he was behind me. Like, come on, where's the pantomime crowd shouting, he's behind you? Come on, help me out, man. But yeah, no, it's become a real concern. And an even bigger concern potentially in the context of Mavro actually going off injured, because I haven't read anything about whether or not it's serious, but you can't imagine a player like Mavro, again, plenty to criticise about Mavro in his game, also plenty that I think is massively over-egged. Probably the best centre-back we've got on form and in terms of stylistic fit to this system. Mm-hmm. And also, you can't really criticise him, in my opinion, for his commitment to the team as well. I feel like he always goes out there and gives it everything he's got. So
the only thing sometimes for him is giving it a little bit too much.
Too much, exactly. Yeah. But for him to leave the pitch when we're losing with a reasonable amount of time still on the clock and no subs left suggests to me that it could be quite bad. And I think for us, that is quite bad, because it means that we've just spent the best part of 10 minutes talking about how poor that centre-back partnership was in the first half. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to be able to change it, because what's the alternative? I guess Igor, but who knows? That feels like a roll of the dice at this point.
Did you have like bottom 1% for aerials won in Europe's top 5 leagues
Mamma mia.
last season?
Oh, yes, I think
that, to be fair to him, he did play a bit of left back, so,
Yeah. Now, do you know what? Let's get confident. I've seen what Nuno did to Murillo. Next.
I'll leave that there. Look, on centre-backs, a couple of things I want to say. Look, we've spoken a lot about Jean-Clair Todibo. Maximilian Kilman is a centre-back that is the kind of centre-back that should win aerials. Todibo's known for what he does as a wide coverer, as a winner of tackles, as a player who contributes a lot in build-up. Some of those moments in this game are okay. He's always been someone who's not particularly reliable in the air, and here he was not particularly reliable in the air. Kilman is someone who's meant to be good in the air. Kilman was horrendous in the air. There's no excuse for being as bad as he was in this game in the duels. Physically, he needs to do so much better than he did. Yeah, it's abysmal. And
2 of 8.
Yes,
2 of 8 won. He lost 6 aerial duels.
Yeah. Really, really shocking level of performance from him. I think he can get his head in on the first goal as well. I feel like the ball's difficult, but I think he can put his head in there. And you mentioned it when we were watching it. There are lots of situations where he kind of heads the ball and backs himself to then win the race, and then just loses the race, which is
puts us under immense pressure.
It's very frustrating, especially against a team like Brentford, because often what that leads to is a corner or a throw-in, which then leads to like 5 minutes of attack because we can't defend a set piece and we can't get out after a set piece. So, that's not good enough. You mentioned Mavropanos and his importance. He's the flip side. I thought, and it's such a shame that he got injured, because I thought he came on and like absolutely smashed a marker down of, well, that was stupid, not starting me, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because I thought he played really well as an individual in the second half. We were bad in the second half. He was good in the second half as an individual. He handled the duels much better and did a much better job than either of the two that had started the game. Tomáš Souček, aerially, that is not the level I know from Tomáš Souček on set pieces.
No, and
I'm almost reluctant to go in too much on that for two reasons. One, because I've never seen him put in a performance like that aerially before, ever. And two, because he got a massive gash in the first half. And actually, I think he'd won almost all of his aerials prior to that, and then he lost the vast majority of them after that. So I'm not going to nail that down as a definite excuse, but his performance on defensive set pieces from that point onwards was nowhere near what it should be. There were lots of situations where he's lost first contact, where I'm not used to seeing Souček losing first contact on set pieces. That's a big worry. And we've got one other individual that I want to devote time to, and it's Lucas Paquetá. And it's just, there's a first half that happens where he's playing up front, and the physical duels are the physical duels that you get when Lucas Paquetá is playing up front. The drop and link moments are the drop and link moments that you get when Lucas Paquetá is playing up front. And that's, as bad as you'd expect it to be with the former and as good as you would expect it to be with the latter. The second half starts and there's, some weird stuff happening from the 3-4-3 at the start, but I actually think probably the first 10 minutes of the second half is possibly the most organised we look for the whole game. It's not necessarily that the performance is really good in that period, but it's the most competent the team looks from an defensive organisation point of view. And then after that, the decision is made to put Paquetá back in midfield, which, given the issues we were facing in build-up, makes some sense because we've been forced long and he can't win the aerials. So if we want to bring a striker on, they're not going to win the aerials, so we need to move Paquetá back so we can actually try and find a way to play through on the deck. It makes sense how it all happens. His out-of-possession performance when we're 1-0 down, I know the game felt like it was 4-0, we were 1-0 down in a 6-pointer. His out-of-possession performance in those last 30 minutes was possibly the lowest level I've ever seen from him. I mean, he went completely missing in midfield for half an hour. He was pressing like a striker, leaving Souček completely on his own. We then bring Guido Rodriguez on, which kind of exacerbates the issue because Rodriguez is quite slow and immobile, and you leave him playing alone in midfield. It's going to cause really big issues. Brentford should have been scoring at will in that period because the amount of times they were able to play fullback inside to a number 10, to 10 or to one of the midfielders and just run straight through the middle of the pitch completely unopposed. It's not on for the previous managers, like someone like Lopetegui, who wanted to be a bit more open and attacking and try and force more shots and create, more going forward and score more than the opposition. It's beyond not on for a manager like Nuno, who's going to press less intensely, sit off more, and focus more on what you can do on the counter-attack and defending well as a unit. It was a joke the way that we defended the gaps in midfield, and a lot of that was to do with Lucas Paquetá. I think just leave it there because I there's little more to say about that. He's done it once before that badly to my memory, and that was it 5-1 against Newcastle at home or something like that, where he was just all over the place and didn't seem really that bothered about picking anyone up. I think that's it. We don't need to talk more about it. I think just to flag that obviously a lot of fans will have watched the goal that we conceded, the first goal, and I think rightly the centre backs were getting a lot of the blame because they didn't really handle the duel very well. But go all the way back to the start, and that's the perfect example of what you were talking about, right? Where Damsgaard is able to just... Is it Damsgaard? Maybe it's Yarmolyuk. I think it's like Yarmolyuk. Yeah, it's Yarmolyuk.
Yeah. And it's because the press is just so ineffective. It's just not a press, is it really? It's just kind of moping around. You cannot let the access in a system where the whole sort of point is block access to the middle and force outside. Sure, if we manage to force them outside, we'll probably lose the duel that comes later on down the pitch when they've crossed it into the box. But at least do your bit and sort of, at least you can't blame the system then. But it starts up there, and if you're not able to successfully block central access, then we will get screwed. Even more so when we have the midfield that we do at the minute, which just cannot contest. Like it becomes even more of an issue if the middle is breached, because it's not an area of the pitch where we can back ourselves at the minute.
Slightly symptomatic, I think, of playing Somerville as a 10.
Yeah.
Because what happens there is Fernandes is actually in the middle for a minute, and they swap over, and then as the ball turns over for Brentford, Fernandes goes back to the left, but Somerville doesn't really recognise that that's happened. So he's kind of floating about for a good 5 seconds before he clocks on and thinks, I'm actually meant to be pressing here.
Yeah.
Or I'm meant to be not necessarily pressing, but making sure that I deny access to
Covering,
to the centre of the pitch. Happens too late. They get free turn off Yarmolyuk. And if you get free turn in the centre of the pitch behind the front two against a 4-4-2 mid block, it's kind of cut. It's very difficult to defend from there.
Yeah.
Our centre backs can do better, but if the weight of the ball is right, the defence has to drop because there's no pressure to the ball. So all of the back four have to kind of start running towards our own goal to protect against the ball over the top. If the weight is right, it's very difficult to cope with those situations and not end up conceding. Especially because the midfield also has to kind of push in those moments. So the gap between the midfield and defence just gets ginormous. So even if you win the first ball, it's quite easy for a Brentford player or whoever the opposition is, for a midfielder, then for the opposition to just run onto the loose ball that drops from that first duel and create a scoring situation. Kudos a little bit to Alphonse Areola, who I think had some really good saves in this game.
Mm-hmm.
We know what his distribution is like. It is what Areola's distribution is like. And Somerville too, who had some bright moments going forward. One of the players that comes out with a little bit of credit. We'll go in more depth on individual performances on ET and lots of other stuff that we've prepped for today. But I think that takes us to the last section, which I'm really scared to do. I'm really scared to do it, Cal. But we've got to do a break and get there. Don't leave. Stay with us.
Oh, don't leave.
Okay, here we go. I've got a horrible question to ask you. Before that, join us over on Patreon. Don't leave. I noticed a few of you. I did notice it at full time. There's more stuff coming. There's good stuff coming. We'll do lots of detail on the game, of course. But if you want to ask questions, like if you finish this match and you were like, well, what the hell happened with the decision to pick fullbacks on the wrong side? The Q&A is for that, and we'll crack out the tack board if necessary and go through the real detail of what's gone on, look at very specific things. I think, like, how does Christopher Ayer's individual performance and the runs that he makes in the first half affect the momentum of the first half, and how, when momentum shifts, do you find a way to turn it? All these sorts of more in-depth questions are the kind of thing that we'll go into on that show. And we've done lots of good other stuff on Patreon recently. I was really pleased that we managed to get out a scouting piece, first one of the season, looking at the players that we've had an eye on so far this season from around Europe, looking at a lot of Ligue 1 players and some guys from the Bundesliga, and there'll be more of that as we go on through the season. We've done I've done a lot of footage review already so far this season, so there's a good filter on that stuff. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of players watch before we report back with players that we have sort of concrete feelings about being interesting players that West Ham should have an eye on going forward. So if you're interested in anything like that, or even quiz night, which has been really great fun over the last few months, really enjoyed doing that, then join us over on patreon.com/Analytics United. We'd love to see you there. Can managers be blamed if the squad has consistently weakened year on year? We've had 4 different managers now who have really struggled to get something going across an extended period of time. The end of Moyes possibly linked to kind of a feeling around the place that it was coming to an end. I think everyone felt in the second half of that season that it was a bit over and performances dropped off. So maybe that's a slightly different story, but certainly Lopetegui, certainly Graham Potter, certainly Nuno in this game. And we obviously recognise it's one game. Performances in other games weren't as bad as this specific match. Have but they've all run into similar issues where it's looked quite bad across all areas, kind of consistently. And how much can they be blamed when that is the backdrop, when our recruitment has been as poor as it has been over such a long period?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? I think managers always have to hold some element of blame, because it is ultimately their job to come in and get the best out of what they have at their disposal. And the nature of any Premier League job, like, they know what they're going into, because especially in the context of West Ham, every manager that's come in has come in to replace someone that it wasn't going right for. So you know what the context is. You know that this is an underperforming squad. You've sat down and had the meeting with the owner, and you've told them that you'll be able to do a better job, and you've set out your stall and said, here's why, here's what I'll do to improve. So to that extent, you have to shoulder some of the blame, because you presumably you haven't sat down and gone, no, these guys are shit, but just give me the job anyway, because it'll be fun. Like, you haven't said that. So you have to take some responsibility because you've underperformed on what you said you'd deliver. However, I think the further we get away from Moyes in terms of managers, like volume of managers, I think the stronger the argument to the contrary becomes, because I think the more obvious it is that whatever portion of that blame managers should be expected to take on, I think becomes diluted, because it's clear that there's a longer list of managers who all have good track records and pedigrees at other clubs of getting the best out of players in various different ways, and not one of them has managed to get a tune out of the squad. And even Moyes, who had struggled towards the end. So I think to that extent, it is really difficult. And I think, like, in part, I think you have to, it's based on expectation, right? And I think maybe as a fan base, we obviously have expectations that are set based on where we have once reached. And I think there has to be maybe an element of a reality check, because the squad hasn't kept pace maybe with the rest of the league. So to expect that we should just by default be competing for top 8 is maybe naive of us as a fan base, and of myself, because that's where I see us. That's where I think we should compete. But actually, when I zoom out and I look at the squad and I look at last night and think we're bringing off the bench the likes of, and this is no disrespect to any of the players that came on, but we've got a bench that features Potts, that features Callum Marshall, Andy Irving starting, Scarles is starting. Like, that's not, that's it's kind of giving championship, isn't it, in some respect, and that's really harsh, but like, that is the level that the squad has got to. And you look around the Premier League and you're seeing teams that are looking to compete for the top 8 bringing on players that have played in the Champions League previously. Like, it's very, very different levels.
Yeah, for comparison, left back and midfield, at Burnley you're looking at like Quincy Hartman, Florentino Luis, or like Leslie Ukachuk. Like, these are players who, certainly with Hartman and Luis, have come from a really high level to go into that squad. Mm-hmm. That's the level of investment that's being made across the Premier League in starting 11s plus the 7 or so that are going to feature regularly. And our squad has, in terms of who's playing, has got a lot of guys that are not of the same level or not of the same experience as most squads around us, even in the Premier League.
I think that's precisely it. And it comes, if you boil it down to its simplest form, I think a workman is only as good as his tools, right? Is kind of the analogy that you could use. Like, if I went into my day job and they asked me they set the expectations of, like, I don't know, everyone at this point knows I work in a charity and fundraiser. So if they came in and set me this target of, like, we want to punch above our weight, we want to achieve this amount of income this year, and we want to be up there with some of the big dogs in the next few years, the heavy hitters, all the charities that everyone's heard of and that regularly donate to. That's where we want to be. And I got there on my first day and I turned up and they didn't give me a laptop. They gave me a pen and a piece of paper and the yellow pages and went, go on. I'm like, well, look around you. All these other charities have modernised. This is not me having to go at my charity. I love my charity and we do very good and we do punch above our weight. But just like, without a completely hypothetical situation. Look around you. The charities have modernised. The sector is moving forward at a pace. There are now tools. There are now databases that I need access to be able to do my job. I do have access to them, guys. I do get access. But if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to do my job. And the charity would go down the Swanee. And that is kind of where it feels like we're at. It's like everyone is modernising. And this isn't just like players as well, right? It's not just squad. Like
it's everything. You look at the amount of analysts that came in with Brentford.
I was going to bring that up. It was like they usually teams bring 3 or so. These guys had 2 rows. They had to sit behind each other. They couldn't even fit on our desk. Yeah. So when you look at that, and that's the level that teams that have come from similar, if not humbler beginnings than we did, right? Like Brentford have overachieved. I think that's fair to say. But in part because they've been so well run. And I think it's fine for us to think that we should finish higher in the table than Brentford based on history and based on where we've come from. But based on the way we've been run in the last 10, 15 years, I don't think we really can necessarily expect that anymore, which is a real shame and makes it really difficult for any manager that comes in here because it will be so far removed from anywhere they've ever worked. Realistically, and like
and where else do you find such big gaps between expectation and reality? You know, expectation is high here, as it should be. Fans should have high expectations. It's a big club. Plays in a for everything we say about the stadium correctly. We say about the stadium. It's if you just do like capacity, got a lot of seats in there. So it's a big club with a not a massive history compared to other teams in the Premier League, but a bigger history than a lot of the teams that are in the Premier League right now. And recent achievements that are beyond many of the teams in the Premier League. So that it's correct that expectation is at such a level from fans of the football club. Expectation should be there. Reality is not there. The reality of our situation is a long way from that. And I've, the big bad relegation word was kind of, that's kind of where I was before the start of the season when we had a different manager. I was talking about it being, for me, a question of whether we might just about stay up this season. And I'm not surprised because the way that, I'm doing a pre-season assessment is purely on, right, those are the 18 players I think are going to be most involved at the 20 clubs. If we play that team, and that team, who's got the better players? And generally, I think the teams with the better players are going to win more often. And most of the teams that we come up against are going to have a better core group of players than we do. And it's not because our players are really bad. It's not because I think our players are rubbish. It's because I think ultimately what we've done is we've ended up with really mismatched group that don't blend together. As an individual in one position, you might look okay, but then when you blend with 2 other positions to make a midfield, or blend with 1 other position to make a centre-back partnership, or blend with 2 other positions to make a front line, it just doesn't come together into something coherent in the same way that it does at a lot of other football clubs in the Premier League. Look at our recruitment this summer. Good step in the right direction from what happened previously. Was it heavily informed by what Potter had planned to do in pre-season? Absolutely it was. It's heavily informed by an idea of playing a 5-3-2, having a drop-off 9, having a ball-carrying central midfielder to go in there to help bring sort of the artificial transition moments to life when we'd done our slow build-up and bounced off 9 and found a way to progress. We brought in a flying left wing-back to put crosses in to Nicholas Fulkrug and maybe Tomáš Souček, and Jared Bowen arriving on the back stick playing as kind of like a second striker. We played a 4-4-2 with out of possession with Crescencio Somerville and Lucas Paquetá up front on Monday night. This is what happens when you change things around. And was it right to change? Yes, but if you don't recruit over a long period of time with a clear idea of what you're building towards or what you're trying to build, or having some sort of identity in the group that transcends the manager of the moment, then you land in this position where you have a group that doesn't make much sense, which and some of the individuals are also not good enough. And I would suggest that, these outcomes, the consequences that we experience, they're not inevitable full stop. Managers can do things to overcome these conditions. They can, you can have exceptional motivators that find a way to build a strong group that really believe in each other, that work for each other, that go out and fight for each other day in, day out, and find a way to get results. And you have managers that are tactically brilliant and come up with new solutions to cause different sorts of problems and find ways to do far better than what you would think the squad capable of. But it's much harder when you don't have a physical level that's good enough to be a physical team, when you don't have a technical level that's good enough to be a technical team, and when you don't have a leadership level that's good enough to be the kind of team that stamps authority on every game,
mentality
no matter
monsters.
what, and when you have none of those three things, what kind of team are you? It's very difficult to find any sort of consistency, any kind of consistent results. And a summary of that for me is, compare the money spent and the outcomes generated between us over the last 3 seasons, where our squad was in 2022 to where it is now in 2025, to Brentford, a team who, massive credit to them, done amazingly post. I mean, it's been super impressive. Do I think they'll still be down there at the end of the season? Yes, I do think they'll probably still be down there at the end of the season. But to have been confident enough to promote from within and believe in the structure that was there and believe in so many of the players that they'd recruited earlier to develop into bigger roles in that squad, and to get rewarded for that, which they are being rewarded because they have a clear idea of what they want to do. They have players that are signed up to what they want to do and understand what they want to do, and they're executing it well. And they should have beaten us by a lot more than they did on Monday night. With all of that said, they're a much smaller club than West Ham. They've spent barely anything, less than £1 million, less than 1 million on replacing. I mean, both squads have turned over. Most of the squads, 85+% of the squads from 2022 to 2025 have turned over in both cases. They've spent barely anything on doing that and have improved in loads of positions. They've got really high quality players into that group. Jan Moljek's a fantastic example. The trust that they showed in Damsgaard over years, which he's now repaying in spades. Coyote, brilliant piece of recruitment. The trust they showed in Nathan Collins, recruited for quite a lot of money, had made lots of mistakes, but has developed into an absolutely fantastic player who's brilliant on Monday night. Same for Igor Thiago, big ACL injury. Are you still the striker that we believe in? Absolutely you are. And now look at the way that he's converting on that belief. Similar with Van den Berg, similar with a player like Janelt, who, where did he come from? And look how good he has been over a long period of time for them. Henderson, another really good example, the opposite end, not like a young player that you recruit, but exactly the right kind of thing that squad needed. Barely any money spent. And they've done a very, very good job of keeping together a group that is competitive in the Premier League and that can win any game against anyone on a day where they all turn up and play well. Us, who spent in euros over 150 million quid replacing the squad that we had in 2022, and almost everyone is worse than the squad that we had in 2022. We've lost key leadership figures, players that we could rely on to give a certain level every single week, and we've lost absolutely brilliant physical dominators, duelers, players that you could hang your hat on. Ogbonna and Zuma would turn up and would give you a level physically in the duels every single game. And a lot of money has been spent over a long period of time on making a squad, putting a squad together that unfortunately is quite a lot worse. And I'll step off my soapbox, but I just think when that's the case, I think we have to adjust the level of expectation a little bit and answer a new question for this year, which is, what do we need to do as a football club to get through this season and find a way to stay in the Premier League, and try and start making the right decisions from here on, that can help us dig our way out of this this situation? And that is a question we're going to ask on Extra Time, which you can join us on patreon.com/United. We'd love to see you there. We've got ideas, and we'll talk about them at length on that show. So see you over there. Thank you, Cal.
Thank you.
I hope you all have a lovely week, and we'll see you after Leeds.